Do you want to add a ton of style and flair to every sling of a spell or swing of a sword in your Foundry VTT game? Then Automated Animations has you covered. Just take a look at some of these absolutely gorgeous special effects that don't require any coding expertise at all. Hey everyone, this is Zephyr, and welcome to the Bailiwiki channel, where we teach everyday DMs how to create truly amazing experiences for their players by combining art and technology. We also make modular systems and scenes for Foundry VTT that you can use without any setup, some of which are going to be the backdrop for today's video where we're covering automated animations. This is one of our favorite modules for adding a ton of really cool effects to your games. It's a really easy system to engage with to add just a little bit of spice to your visual presentation in your games, and has some awesome customization features available to your players. And while it is easy to engage with, there's also an incredible amount of depth should you want to really dive in and that's what we're going to be doing here today. We'll start off simple with an overview of the module and how it works, and then we'll start getting into how to customize these different animations that automatically play with increasing levels of depth and detail. Then we'll showcase how this works much the same across a vast array of systems in the Foundry VTT world. And finally, we'll cover using preset modules like D&D5e Animations to bring in a whole library of animations ready to go at your fingertips. When you first fire up automated animations, you'll notice that some things are ready to go right out of the box. If we come in here, I have 3 of our heroes, Eustace the Undying, the Undead Mentor with a ton of health, a couple of bandits, and a spellcaster here so we can demonstrate a few of these different features. First demonstrate this with Ventress. And I'm going to be using the Argon Combat HUD as it helps me use these actions easier while keeping everything in frame here for you. So you'll see that when I make an attack with a rapier, we get this nice animation that plays, and of course Dice So Nice is functioning as well. Similarly, if we go over to Angus and use his Great Axe, we'll see that it's also got its own animation. And Gomer here has some spells up his sleeve, and we can use Firebolt for the same effect. So these are all built in immediately. There's a lot of different things that are available to you right out of the box, depending upon your system and how that's set up. But a lot of these commonly used items are going to work across just about any system. So things like weapon types are going to already be built in, and then some spell effects that are kind of commonly named across, say, D&D and Pathfinder and other similar fantasy RPGs are also going to be available, so you'll have those right out of the box. So if you just installed automated animations and its requirements and went off to the races, you would have some functionality, particularly if most of your setting or game is going to be using mainly martial weapons and things like that, as a lot of those are already set up. But if you want to add additional ones, then we get into the global recognition menu, where we're going to be doing the bulk of our adjustments here today. There are a few ways you can get there. The first is by going into your configure settings, and for automated animations, there's this launch menu option. There's also all of these settings here that you can configure, but more on those in just a moment. Because when we launch the menu, this is the main port of call for all things automated animations. This is our global menu, so this applies to everything by default. And we'll first look up at the top at the title bar here. And you can see there is a gear icon called settings, and you'll notice that all of those settings that are in your module configure settings are also here as well. It may at first glance look like some of the settings in the regular module settings are missing, but if you go down and expand any system specific dropdowns, then you'll have access to those additional settings. A few things to call out here. The first is this JB2A asset location. You don't need to worry about this unless you are hosting JB2A modules on a S3 bucket or something like that, you know who you are if that's what's going on. So you can take care of that there. Then in terms of other settings that you want to pay attention to, you can turn off some of the animations, like there are animations for active effects. You can disable those entirely and then it won't search for them. And for D&D5e here, or your particular system, there's probably going to be options for different animations on hits and misses, and also criticals, whether they're critical successes or failures, etc., and whether or not you're going to only play animations on damage rolls, so that it is not when you're making the attack. Some of those might require additional integrations, like the hits and misses requires MIDI QOL for D&D5e, but that will vary. Then I also want to call out template grids on hover. Basically, whenever you have a spell template, then you will not see the grids unless you are hovering over them if you have this turned on. Token Magic Effects also has this setting, and you need to pick which one you want to handle this. Relatedly, if we go into Token Magic Effects, there is a setting for Enable Automatic Template Effects, and it's also governed by this template settings that allows you to apply token magic effects to templates automatically based on damage type. This is normally enabled by default. If you're using automated animations, you may want to turn this off, because then it can look a little strange, because the template, as soon as it's placed, has the token magic effects filters applied to it, while automated animations may play an animation over top of it, and it can look a little strange sometimes. Just keep that in mind if you don't like the look of the templates having all kinds of extra effects on them when you're using automated animations. Returning to our menu, that's pretty much all there is for the settings that are really important to take note of. They're fairly self-explanatory, and the wiki has some good information on all of these. The other one you might want to pay attention to is the Hide Animation tab from players. So this makes it so players can't customize their animations. You have to do it for them. You can toggle between settings and the main menu through that same button. You'll see it switches between wheel and the kind of listicle type icon. And then to the right of that, you have diagnostics. This opens up a menu that will give you an idea on if you have any settings incorrect. And if you see all green, you're definitely good to go. Red means you have something you need to address. The blue things are going to be situational. So in this case, it says sequencer effects permissions are set to players and above. There are certain things in automated animations where you can set up effects to linger for a long period of time. And one of the ways you can do that is you can have it be managed by a sequencer. If you're doing that, the GM can always remove any of the effects that are added. However, players normally are not going to be able to remove anything unless they are trusted or above. So for this remove all effects and things like that, then you may need to go in and change stuff to players and above, depending upon if you're using that. Out of the kind of preset modules that we discussed earlier that are giving you all of these different options or giving all these pre-configurations, I have not personally experienced anything using the sequencer effects where I run into a problem where the players need those permissions. However, if you're setting up effects like that, then make sure you have the settings correct there for the behavior that you want. When you're all done with diagnostics, we can take a look back at the global menu. And in the global menu, you have these 7 kind of categories. You've got melee, range, on token, templates, aura, preset, and active effects. These are going to be your categories for types of animations, and it's going to affect what they can pull from. And we'll explore this a little bit more in depth as we actually look on a character, but this is the starting list, and everything in automated animations plays via name. So whenever you use an item that has dagger in it, it is going to play the dagger animation. Now, it's worth noting that this is trying to match the string with the biggest text. So if you use a greatsword, it would recognize sword, but it also recognizes greatsword, which is the longer name, so it's going to match with that instead. So this is how you kind of go through the logic here. And these different typings are, again, based on the types of animations here. Melee is just kind of playing one animation in that general direction here. Range might have an animation played on the source character and the target character. Then on token is just going to be on a token is where the effect is going to appear. Templates are playing special effects based upon templates. Auras will follow things around. Then presets are more complex setups that have multiple chains of animations to them. Then finally, active effects are things that will persist if you have active effects on you. Now that doesn't just apply to conditions like Frightened here, it also applies to any kind of active effect. So you can name this, say, Rage, and have an effect there as well. For all of these categories, you can close everything. So if you have a bunch of things popped open and it's cluttered, you can use the close all button. You can search by a name. You can sort things. And you can also delete everything, though I would recommend against that. At the bottom, you'll also have the menu manager. And in here, you have 4 options: restore the default menu, merge menu, which is going to look at a menu from a JSON, and it's going to bring in anything that you're missing. So say we didn't have crossbow here, but we did on this menu we're bringing in, it would bring in crossbow. But if you have a bow on both lists, it's not going to bother to bring in the new bow. It's not going to create duplicates. It's not going to overwrite anything. Then overwrite menu will delete an entire category, so say ranged or melee, and will then replace it with the contents of another imported menu. You can do this by category, but you can't do this by particular item. And then finally, we have export menu, which is going to dump everything into a JSON file. We'll go over this a little bit more later on when we're discussing backups before using a preset menu and things like that. So that's the global recognition menu. As I mentioned, there's a couple ways. The first is through those configure settings. Additionally, you can go into any actor or token here, view their items, and click on the automated animations menu. And this is going to be their individual one that we'll go over here in a moment. And then you can click on the global icon, and then we'll open up the global menu. On a lot of these, you'll also notice that there's a little info icon that will give you some information about whatever you're looking at. And there's also a ton of information on the wiki. The final way that we could open this is via a macro. And this macro is included in the D&D5e Animations menu, but you don't need the D&D5e Animations module to make this macro. It's just a simple hooks.call, and then it's calling the automatic animations open menu. So those are your 3 main ways. If you're doing a lot of things with the auto recommendation menu, then the macro is really nice, but you can of course keep things open and move them around. Now let's go into customizing one of these. For range, if we go in here, you'll see that this is not just ranged weapons, it's also spells. Range is a type of animation or type of targeting that's playing. So we'll go ahead and close out Gomer's sheet and have this pulled over to the side a little bit as we modify Firebolt, and we can see how that changes. So for Firebolt here, this is global, and the top piece is the source animation, and that's going to be what is playing on the source token. So the source token is who is casting the spell, or in this case, originating from it. And then this primary animation is just what's happening here. And you have the type selection, the animation selection, and then the variants and colors. The amount of variants and colors that you'll have available is going to change depending upon whether you're using the JB2A premium module or the free module here. You can also select custom and then manually navigate to a specific animation file that you have. Next up, we have options. And we'll dive into the specifics on these in a moment. Then we have color tint, which you can adjust there. You can also add in sounds. And these black boxes are basically checkboxes to enable editing these different aspects. Then secondary animation is going to be the second thing that plays. And then your target animation is any kind of animation that happens on the target. So as a quick demonstration, we have the firebolt. We'll change the color here to a purple color. We can simply close that. And now when Gomer shoots his firebolt, we'll see that it is now purple. We'll also notice we have this Archmage back here, and they also have the firebolt spell. And that is likewise purple. So the global automatic recognition menu is going to affect everybody with that spell. As we mentioned earlier, though, you can customize these. So if we go and look at the item and go into automated animations, we can see that this global match was found. Essentially, this is saying that Firebolt, by default, everything's going to have animation enabled. And then it's going to look and see if there's a global match. And that's just something that is in here with the appropriate name, so Firebolt here. Similarly, if you also just had Bolt, then that would appear as well. And it would also be considered as a valid global match. So again, it's going to match the longest string, but you can use shorter strings as kind of a catch-all. Then you can also see what exactly is being matched. So in this case, it's the ranged tab, and then the label is Firebolt. And now we can do customize item, and this is going to allow you to customize the particular version of this spell for this token in specific. What I would suggest is you want to have this copy from auto-rec, and this is going to copy the global match that we had up here at the top, and we're going to bring it onto this particular customized version. And so now we have this customized Firebolt, and we can make this one say blue. And for this, you will want to hit submit or submit and close. We'll go ahead and hit submit, and we'll change our global recognition back on Firebolt back to that orange color. Notice that you don't need to hit submit on the global recognition menu, just on this local one. So again, we'll hit submit and close. And now if we use Gomer's Firebolt, it should appear blue. Looks like it. And this Archmage, when they use Firebolt, it's going to be that orange color again because we changed and updated our global recognition menu. So you can customize these things on an individual basis. This is going to be bound per token and each item on that token. So you can adjust this and customize this for your own NPCs or monsters or for your players, and your players can then customize things as well. So this is a really cool way that your players can customize things and feel a bit unique. So if you have multiple mages that all have Firebolt, maybe they have different colored flames or something like that, and it's a really neat way to add a lot of customization and depth pretty easily. Now let's take a look at adding an animation from scratch. So if we open up Gomer and we take a look at the Burning Hand spell, we'd see in the Automated Animations customization menu here that there's not a global match, so there's nothing in this global recognition menu here that matches Burning Hands. So we're going to create one. First, we'll do Customize Item, and for now we're going to leave everything on the customization part here. And this animation type is going to be important for the types of animations that are available to us. So here, I'm going to go ahead and select templates because the Burning Hand spell uses a template. And there are a lot of options for customizing everything. We're going to keep this super simple right now, and then we'll dive into the more detailed version here after a little bit. So first, we have this on templates, and the very first thing you want to do is change your type, and in this case, it's going to be a cone. Then you have options for your animation, variant, and color, just like we did with the earlier animations. And there's actually a preset for Burning Hands already, so we'll go ahead and use that. And there's a couple variants. We're going to stick with just the one. In options, there are a whole lot of different things you can configure. We'll go through this in a little more detail later on. The only one I'm going to worry about right now is remove template. If you're diving into this at all, then you can also take a look at the quick reference here. And this basically tells you what all of these different settings do. Now, we'll notice that we have primary animation here. This one is always specified. The source animation is going to play on the token that's starting it. The secondary animation will play on either the targeted token or on the source token if there are no targets. And then finally, the target animation will always play on the target. And if there are no targets, it will not play. But that is a basic setup there. All we did was just change this to a template, select the appropriate shape, and then assign the animation variant and color. So now I'll hit submit and close. And now when Gomer uses Burning Hands, and we'll go ahead and remove the spell slot consumption there. And this is going to play that nice animation for us. I selected to remove template. You can choose to leave that on. It's nice for being able to check and see what's in the range of this token if you're not fully automating things. In this case, I wanted to reduce the clutter from having token magic effects automatic templating going. So now we have that, we're happy with it. You can obviously tinker with this a lot more and get exactly how you want it to be for everybody. I highly recommend customizing things and setting things up on an individual and using that for all of your experimentation. Then whenever you're at good points that you're happy with where things are at, but you want to do some more tweaking and pushing, but you don't want to necessarily ruin your global setup, you can continue doing that on your individual kind of test character. And whenever you're at those pause points that you're happy with, you can use the triple dots here. And just like we had the copy from before when we were customizing that firebolt, there is an option for copy to. So this is going to go back the other direction. And we'll go ahead and hit submit. And now if we hit submit and close, then the next time we reopen automated animations, you'll see that now this says global match found. If we turn off customization, you can see that it tells us templates and then burning hands. Again, if we use Gomer here, and that's our burning hands. So even though we're not customized, we're still good to go. And we can check on this Archmage here, since we pushed it to the global recognition menu, their version of burning hands also indicates the global match found. And even though we used our guinea pig here, since we pushed everything over to the global recognition menu, this is going to behave exactly the same. So that's the basics of how you can set up all of these different recognitions for your spells, your weapons, all of those good things. And you can go through and you can do this individually, and then you can customize them further. And this allows you to have really beautiful animations with pretty minimal setup right out of the gate. These are the basics. So now let's take a minute to go into the more advanced options you can have for these different animations and spell casting. So we're here on a new scene, and we're going to zoom in on Gomer and use this here. And we're going to set up a bit more of a detailed spell. So using Ray of Sickness, we'll open up automated animations. We can see that no global match has been found, so we're going to customize the item. As we mentioned on Burning Hands, we have to first select the animation type. And we have 6 to choose from when we were creating a custom one. And we have melee, range, on token, templates, aura, and preset. For each of these, you are always going to have the primary animation as a mandatory thing that you must have set up. You can also enable source animations. If you don't have this box ticked, then it's going to be grayed out. And these are going to play on the originating token. So whoever's casting the spell or using the item, that's going to play on them. And that primary is going to vary depending upon the type, but it's typically going to be something that is going from the source to the target. You can also have a secondary animation, which will normally play on the target, but if no targets are found, it will play on the source. Then finally, the target animation, which will play on the target, and if there are no targets, then it will not play. For all of these, you're going to have different kinds of types here, and it's going to vary depending upon this overarching animation type. So for melee, you have 3 options of creature attack, generic, and weapon. And depending upon what type you choose here, it's going to affect what animations you have available, which then in turn affect what variants you have, and finally what colors you have. For ranged, you have weapon, spell, and generic. For on token, you have spell, and then there's also a lot of these other types here that are based on conditions or creature attacks, everything. There are a lot of options in here. Templates, you have essentially the shape of the template. And for auras, you have the same list that you did for on token. Then presets are kind of a special beast. These are a lot more in depth, and there are a lot of options in here. And it's kind of complex to go through all of the different options that you have. So I would recommend actually holding off from exploring presets too much until you feel pretty familiar with automated animations and using some others as examples. So for Ray of Sickness, I want this to be ranged as it's just point to point. And here we're going to go ahead and make this a spell type for the primary animation. And we have a few different options for what we want this to look like. We probably don't want chain lightning per se, but we might find something that we like in here. Now, something that you can do is up here at the top, you have a few different tabs. And if we look at preview, it's going to show us what the animation that's going to play is. This is basically just looking at the animation variant and color. And so it allows you to see what it's going to look like. You can see I kind of just experimenting with these different pieces that I like. I did think that the disintegrate in green looked pretty solid. So I'm liking that so far. Let's go ahead and submit and close. And we'll just keep Ray of Sickness off to the side where it's easy to see. And casting a spell, that's fairly satisfying. So that's still pretty basic, just like we had with the Burning Hands option. Now let's take a look at these options that we have in here for customizing this further. As we mentioned earlier, there is this info box that is quick reference, and these are organized by tab. So you can have this options info open to be able to see all of the different pieces available to you for all of the options and how they affect everything. So this is a great reference, and in general, I would defer to this for checking things. I'm just going to cover some of the pieces that you might really want to keep in mind. So to give you an overview of these, which again, you should use the quick reference here if you are going through this yourself just to keep things nice and fresh. But we start with elevation, and elevation is where this is going to appear on the scene in relation to the token. So this is going to be useful for when you're trying to make sure certain things appear below your token artwork or above your token artwork. You can also select absolute, and that is going to, instead of making it relative to the token, be a specific position on the canvas every single time. And you can adjust this. The default of 1000 is perfectly fine to me. Repeat does what it says on the tin. It's going to repeat the animation a certain number of times. And then repeat delay has no function if you don't have repeat specified. It will increase the time waited between the repetitions if you do have a repeat setup. Then effect opacity is going to change just how opaque the image is. So you can lower that if you want it to be easier to see underneath, etc. Z-index is how it's going to stack up in relation to other animations. Return animation and only X are very specific settings here. Only X is for if you're making a custom animation. So if you have specified your file path here with custom, then you can choose to keep the Y scale of your image constant, but then change the scale of the X. So if you're doing custom things and you think it looks a little strange, then try turning this on and seeing how it works. And then return animation is going to be for specific animations only. So only if there is an appropriate paired return animation available to you can you turn this on. Random offset is going to change the impact point on the target, which can be cool for adding some variation. And the playback rate allows you to speed things up or slow things down for the particular animation that you're using. And then reverse animation plays the animation reverse. And then finally, you also have delay and wait. Delay and wait are a little interesting. So all of the animations are set to play starting at the same time by default. And the delay is going to add a buffer zone from when the system tells the animations to begin playing to when this particular animation begins. So you can use this to have something start, say, 500 milliseconds after the rest of the animations have started. This is useful if you want things to play simultaneously, but there might be a longer bit of dead space or transparency at the beginning of another animation. And then wait, rather than affecting this block, actually affects subsequent blocks and makes it so that it will wait a certain amount of time after this animation has played before going on to the next. This will also accept negative values if you are using wait. Not if you're using delay, but if you're using wait and only wait. This allows you to say, rather than begin once this animation is finished, begin this many milliseconds before the animation has finished. And that will come up here in a moment. These options are going to vary from the type to type, but these are also the general settings that you're going to have for most of these. There are a few specialized things, like as we mentioned earlier with the template. There's options for removing the template, and you can also adjust scale and rotations or anchor points if they are relevant. Melee has fewer options. And onToken also has what's being defaulted or what's being played on. So for example, the onToken is generally going to be on your target, but then if no target's found, it's then going to go on the self. And you also have fade outs and anchors and everything for how you're setting up these effects. Similar situation on the auras, but returning now to our ranged. So that's kind of our gist. So now let's play around with these a little bit. So I'm going to add the random offset. So I have my spell set up again, and I'm going to just hit submit, and then we'll use Ray of Sickness a couple of times, and we'll see how the targeting is varying. So you can see here, we hit kind of in this bottom right quadrant. And up here we have the top left. So that's a cool way we can adjust that. And now we can also adjust the playback rate. So say I want to differentiate this more from disintegrate. We'll slow it down a little bit. And we definitely have a slower, more sludgy type of feel to the animation here. After our general options, we also have color tint. So you can apply an additional color to this. So if I just leave it white, we'll see that it doesn't change anything, but you can use this to tint things a little bit. So if I want this to have kind of a yellowy green color to it, you can see it has more of that color. It's particularly nice whenever there is a color option for white, which is more frequently on weapon trails and things like that. Then we can also add sound effects. So with sounds, you can add all sorts of things to play with this. So if you have different modules, so for example, PSFX is a popular one. And in here, we can look through some of these different options. And we have this nice sound effect. You may want to adjust things a little bit, such as lowering the volume or adding some delay or even removing some delay. You can tweak these fairly heavily or find different pieces. I'm going to go ahead and just leave this particular sound on. So now let's explore some of the extra animations we can add on top here. I'm going to go into source animation and turn that on. The default type here is going to be spell, and there's a lot of options. These more or less correlate to the categories or folders inside of JB2A. And I'm going to go into magic sign, and within that I'll choose necromancy, and I like the complete version here, or perhaps rune complete. And just like we were doing with the primary animation, you can use preview. And this will show you now the primary down below and then also the source up at the top. So that's a little long for me. And I'm not a huge fan of just having the rune actually. So we'll go with complete and we can preview again. Great. So I'll set my color. And then in options, there's a few things that I want to do. Elevation here, you want to set to 0. This is normally 1,000 by default, as you can also see when you hit delete. So I'm going to set that to 0 so it appears underneath my token. And then I also am going to want to change this weight. As we mentioned earlier, delay is going to push back when this animation starts. Weight is going to push back when the next animation starts. But it does accept negative values. And these are going to be in milliseconds here. So looking at my preview, I can see that this is at least a few seconds long. So I probably want to change my weight on this quite a bit. So be somewhat aggressive with it, and we'll do negative 2,000 milliseconds. So that should be 2 full seconds. We'll hit submit. And let's go ahead and click on Ray of Sickness and see how this looks. So we can see we fired our beam, but it did take quite a while through that other animation, so we can bump this up even further. And you can just play around with it a little bit to determine when exactly you want to fire this. Alternatively, you can remove the weight and switch this to delay, and instead have your primary animation just delay a little bit. And maybe that's a more efficient way to do it on this particular effect because the magic circle animations are so long. So that seems like a pretty good balance there. And just to show you, we can switch this to a delay of 0. And we can then delay our primary by about 500 milliseconds here. So that should be half a second, which seems about what we landed on through our weight situation. So that is absolutely an option. That said, you may want to have something wait on this to be finished. So I think generally speaking, the more robust way to do this is to use wait wherever you possibly can, and then delay when you have to. But this is a pretty good result for us so far. So after some tweaking, we've landed on these settings here so that our magic circle is below our feet. And about 8.5 seconds before the magic circle animation completes, we're going to fire off our beam. That roughly corresponds to when the circle has been drawn complete and is sitting under our feet. We can, of course, also add an additional sound for the circle. To keep things a little less cluttered, we're going to opt to leave that alone. And now let's look at secondary animations. So this is going to, again, play on the target, or if we don't have a target, on ourself. So here we have a lot of different options once again, and these are mostly corresponding to the on token type here. It's very similar. If we look at generic, then we might be able to see a few other options. And just as before, we can use our preview. And that water effect looks pretty nice and gross here. So we'll go ahead and use that. And here we may want to lower the opacity because I don't want this to appear below our token. However, I also want to be able to still see the token through it. And then the fade in and fade out is basically the timer on how this is going to work. And again, we can always use the info here. And as we mentioned earlier, this is basically the on token options. So you can always check this if you're not sure how any of these work. For example, the side impact allows you to rotate the effect to make sure that it's on like the appropriate side for some kind of impact. So if you have like a blast radius, in this case, I want this centered on the token. So I'm going to leave that as it is. And for this, we probably want to set up our weight on our primary animation. That way it's going to force the secondary animation to wait until this happens. Go ahead and hit submit and cast the spell again. And we see we have this big rippling effect here. We can play around with this a bit and make sure that things are lining up how we want to with our timings and maybe fine tune some of our different animations here. So we've made some adjustments and fiddled around a little bit. We've gone with the impact type, which is a good place to start for these types of animations that are happening directly on a character. And I've chosen the poison option. And then in my options, I've left the elevation at 1000 and dropped the opacity a little bit so that we can see the token beneath it, but the effect is still going to be over top. And we have adjusted by adding in this add side impact here so that it's going to be oriented a little closer to the point of impact here. And then we've changed our weight to -1500, so a second and a half before the beam animation finishes, we're going to have that explosion of toxins there. The final piece we can add in here is a target animation. Now, this is going to act in pretty much the exact same way our secondary animation is here. As a reminder, secondary animation plays on the target. If you have none, it will play on yourself. The target animation will only play on the target, and if you don't have a target, then it will not play. If we turn on target animation here, we can see we have the spell type. Again, this is going to be using those on token type presets. And here, I'm going to go into conditions, and there's one for poison. Leave it on dark green, and there's a couple different variants for this. And as we've seen before, we can go up and look at our preview, and this will show us all of our different animations that are going to play here. So this allows us to quickly look at these different variants instead of having to go through and observe all of them. It looks like the variance basically is density, so I'm going to stick with the variant 1. In my options, I want the elevation to still be 1000, and we'll lower this opacity again. And I don't think we should have any issues here. I don't feel the need to delay this, and I actually want this to occur at the same time as our secondary animation, that kind of puff of toxic symbols right there and clouds. So I'm going to leave that on delay as well. We'll hit submit. And when we cast the spell, we get this really cool, complex animation here. So this is probably a bit overkill for a lot of different applications here, but it shows you just the power and flexibility that is afforded to you by automated animations. With this, we have a magic circle appearing at our feet. When it is at its apex, then we shoot out a beam, and upon impact with the beam, we have a cloud of poison and a swirling aura of poisoned effects. This is a really awesome effect here, and we also have sound attached to the beam. We could add additional sounds to every aspect of this if we so chose, and it's just a really beautiful way to cast a spell. Again, this is probably overkill for most spells, certainly most first level spells, but if you have a really high powered ability or something that's going to be used only a few times, this is a really awesome way to add a lot of panache. And it also shows you just the power at your fingertips here with automated animations. And of course, we can then push this to our global recommendations if we want to. This is maybe a little over the top for that, but it is an option. Now I want to draw your attention to a few other options here for this particular animation. You can see we have our preview, of course, and then the other buttons to the side have kind of been the elephant in the room, so to speak, during this. 3D Canvas tab appears and allows you to have 3D versions of these animations. So it's not replacing the regular animations that you have. It is its own set of animations for use in 3D Canvas. And when you turn this on, you can see there's a whole lot of options here. And there's also options for having explosions at the point of impact, and also animations played on the tokens, whether those are source or target. We'll demonstrate those here in just a moment. But first, I want to also cover the sound only option. This is a toggle that is going to disable all of your other animations. It will only play a sound when you use the ability rather than any of the animations. So you can use this if you just want to have a specific sound effect for something. Then finally, we have the add macro option. This is going to add a macro to the start of your workflow here, and you just click on it to toggle it. And you will choose when to play this, and you can choose whether it begins right when your animation begins, it plays before your animation, or whether you want to do that after your animation with the await animation, or you just want to do the macro. And the macro only is particularly useful if your macro is calling sequencer type effects and basically being a stand-in for all of the other aspects of automated animations. Actually, fully taking advantage of the macro capabilities of automated animations is going to be beyond the scope of this particular tutorial, but it is there for you, and you can even send arguments so that you can use one macro for a variety of spells, and you just type in, say, a color, and then it will apply that color for the macro rather than you having to have separate macros based on color or things like that. There's a lot of different really powerful things you can do with this. But again, it's going to be a little bit beyond the scope of this particular tutorial. However, Ripper has quite a bit of documentation on that on his wiki for automated animations, which we have linked down in the description. Now that we've examined a lot of the advanced applications here in 2D, let's take a quick look at 3D. This isn't going to be nearly as exhaustive as before. A lot of the same principles apply, but here we'll go ahead and have our 3D canvas flag on and hit enable. And then we can choose how we're going to be firing this. So take a look at, say, this runic ray here. And one thing to note is the preview only shows you 2D, which makes sense here. And you can take a look at these different color options. And again, similarly, the sounds and everything and all of the options are very similar. You can also add in things like an explosion. And for token animation, you can do things like a twirl, also on a shake, and you can choose when you're playing it, whether it's on start or end or both. I'll just go ahead and hit submit, and we'll take a look at that ray of sickness here in 3 dimensions. So we can see that there is not an inherent color, so if you want that, you'll need to make that adjustment accordingly. You can, of course, copy and paste these colors if you want to have matching ones between your initial ability and your beam. So as you can see, there are plenty of options for making your attacks look absolutely gorgeous, not only in 2D, but also in 3D. Again, this wasn't an exhaustive tutorial on all of the 3D aspects, but a lot of the same principles apply, and you always have your info button here to have some more information on how all of these different pieces work together. The last feature that I wanted to highlight is a tab that we don't have when we're customizing individual items on actors, and that's going to be this Active Effects tab. Frightened comes predefined, and I'll demonstrate what that looks like here. So if we right-click on Angus and we go to the Assign Status Effects, and we find Frightened, we'll notice that he has this aura around him, these floating kind of scream heads similar to the icon. And then when we turn this off, Frightened is going to finish and disappear. So if you want to take a look under the hood, you can open up Frightened and see some of the options going on here. And the main thing is this is similar to all of our on-token effects that we had before, where we have the condition type, or the type here, and we've selected conditions, and then we just chose one of these that makes sense. We have our variants, and we've set up our colors and everything. On this, we have this marked as persistent, which means that whenever we have the condition applied, it is going to stay applied as long as the condition is there, and that's why it disappeared earlier. And then we have the effect opacity set to 75%, so that you can still see the token underneath it, or if there's another token nearby, you can still see them. Then we have this set to radius for scaling, so it's going to add an additional 3/4 of a grid unit for the radius on the particular effect. And then this add token width makes it scale to the size of the token. So if I have Eustace here become frightened as well, we can see that it is swirling around him, and it's got the same kind of distance from him as it does from Angus, kind of extends out about the same distance. So that's how you have it stay a certain constant difference around and scale up with your particular token. Now, let's say we want to create our own custom condition for, say, stunned. We're hitting our plus, and then we have the option to name this. So we'll name this stunned, and this should match whatever condition you're going to assign. It should be written exactly the same here, because it's going to be looking by name, and basically just whenever this condition is applied, then it's going to happen. You could do something similar by having extra effects for other conditions, not just the active effects in this menu here. We'll expand this out, and we will select conditions and our type, which in this case is going to be the dizzy stars. And as per usual, we can use our preview. And actually reviewing that, let's make this stun. And we'll add a source animation. And we'll just copy exactly what we had on the frightened here. I'm leaving scale selected for our source because then we want it to be a little more centered on here. So now, if we go ahead and hit stunned, so you have those dizzy stars, and then we have these stunned swirls going around our token, indicating that they are stunned. We did not have this persistent. If we go ahead and apply that, and reapply, now the stunned swirls should stick around him indefinitely. We can also get more complex with this and have like a second animation. And with this, now when we activate stunned, we have our effect going that is persistent for when we are stunned. And when I turn that off, we have this pulse. So you can make these animations for the active effects look pretty detailed as well. And of course, you can add sounds to all of these, tint them with colors, etc. So there's a lot of customization you can do here. So those are the ins and outs of customizing and developing animations using automated animations, both on an individual basis and for global recognition. Thus far, we've only been working in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. However, automated animations is compatible with most systems out there. And we're going to go take a look now at DC20 and see how it functions out of the box there. The same principles for customizing and developing those animations apply, just your out-of-the-box functionality before you get into that is slightly different, and we just want to take a look at those differences now. Any system compatible with automated animations and that uses some similar item naming is going to have a lot of features right out of the box, just like D&D5e does. In this case, we're in DC20. We can see that Gomer here has a short sword that he's going to be using on Eustace the Undying here, and the sword animation plays just fine. Same thing if we switch to his hand axe. And so you can see that many of the weapons are going to work just fine right out of the box for you. And a lot of these names are very common across systems, so you're probably good on that front. Where you will have some varying degrees of success is going to be in spells. So you can see here that I have a Firebolt in DC20, and that works totally fine. However, the Acid Bolt that I have is not pre-configured. So Acid Bolt isn't set up. However, if we look at, say, Magic Missile, that works totally fine. And the same thing for our Guiding Bolt. For things like your Acid Bolt or this Lightning Blade, you'll need to customize those. And there is not a DC20 automated animations module, but it's completely compatible with automated animations. In the future, there will probably be some automated animations module that will have these different things already set up for you, but you are still, of course, able to customize things and build it out just like we did with that Ray of Sickness that we showed off in D&D, and you can customize things in your global recognition menu as well. You may also find it worthwhile to go through here and use the duplicate feature to have starting points, or simply rename some of these to other spells that are in your system. For example, you could modify, say, the Ray of Frost into Bolt of Frost if that is the name for the spell in your system and it functions similarly. And of course, you can customize all of these. And again, you also have the menu manager that allows you to merge in menus or overwrite menus. So what you can do is you can take an export from a system that maybe has a built-out module that has a lot of very similar naming conventions in their extended library that you can then use to bring into other systems that might not have a dedicated automated animations module. So you can grab all of those. And of course, you can then save this and copy it across to other worlds, or you can share them with other folks. So as you can see, the core functionality of automated animations in terms of customizing and specifying the animations, saving them and referencing them is exactly the same across any of these supported systems. And that is the vast majority of TTRPG systems in Foundry. You can check the module page for the full list of compatible systems. It's quite lengthy, so chances are yours is covered. If not, there is a module called Automated Animations for All that is kind of a bridge module that allows some other systems to use it. I have not personally messed with it, but I did want to bring it up as a potential option for folks. So far, everything we've been doing has been some manual customizing. And today, as we mentioned earlier, there are some really great modules that come with all of these configurations ready to go for you. So we're going to demonstrate how that works for D&D5e here with the D&D5e Animations module. First, before we enable that module, I just want to take a look and show that here on these Archmage, if we scroll down to, say, Lightning Bolt, we view this item, we look at the automated animations, there is no global match for this, so this is not in our library already. And we can also just take a look in here and we can see that there's, this same stock that we start with, which is a decent starting point, particularly at low levels of play or if you're using mainly martial characters. But it is definitely not a comprehensive list of all of the spells in D&D. And so if you want all of those, then we'll need to use the D&D5e Animations module. The D&D5e Animations module works by bringing in a giant list of all of these animations, and it can overwrite certain things. For example, it will overwrite all of the base animations, but if you've customized things, then it should ignore those for the most part. But in the event that things are overwritten, you may want to take some backups. Now, it's worth noting that when you overwrite things, this is only going to be overwriting our global recognition menu. Anything that you have customized is going to stay customized. So that Ray of Sickness that we had on Gomer is a custom setup that we've not pushed back to our global recognition menu. So it will not be removed from him, and we can then bring it on later. So if you have something customized, then you don't need to worry about it getting deleted. However, if you want that to be the new standard in your global menu, then we can simply push that to our global menu. And again, whenever we close and reopen this, then it will actually tell us that we have a match found, but we'll leave it uncustomized for now. This is also a way you can kind of have one-off backups rather than having to export the whole menu that you have. You can instead have customize item turned on someone as a kind of placeholder character, and you can copy from the auto recommendation if you have some customized pieces that you want to make sure you keep. And then after you overwrite anything, you can push it back up. So it's a good way to have an extra bit of backup. So we have our Ray of Sickness here, and again, we'll just know that this is using Disintegrate Green, and we have all 4 animation types selected here. So from the menu manager, we can use this to export our menu, and we'll be saving it as a JSON. Go ahead and replace the old version here. So this has just all of the stock pieces and then our customized Ray of Sickness. Now that we've created any backups that we wanted, we're going to go ahead and enable the D&D5e Animations module. And for the D&D5e Animations module, you're going to want JB2A, and just make sure that you have it installed. You don't have to have it enabled, though I do find it seems to understand a little better whether you have Patreon versus free if you have the Patreon one enabled. And it's worth noting that with the D&D5e Animations module, it has a lot of things set up assuming you have the Patreon version. So you might have some slightly less beautiful or slightly stranger looking spell setups in there just because it's expecting more animations or variants than you have. So some things might end up looking a little more similar or just a little different than if you have the Patreon version. Then you also need to have the PSFX module, so Perry's sound effects. And this just adds a library of different sounds and everything. And for this, it doesn't matter whether you have the premium or free version. Similarly to JB2A, you're going to get a little bit more variety if you have the premium version, but it's not required. When you're ready, you'll go ahead and save the module settings. When you come back, you will have a warning here from D&D5e Animations. As we mentioned, you need to have JB2A and PSFX, and you need to have them installed and enabled. Particularly PSFX needs to be enabled, and you'll get a little warning if they don't have the Patreon versions. Again, they recommend you having the Patreon versions, but they're not required here. So after that, you're going to be greeted with the D&D5e Animations update menu. There's 4 sections. You might only have 3 depending. And the top is going to be effects that will be deleted from previous versions of D&D5e Animations. And in this case, Claw, Frightened, and Spirit Guardians are actually built into automated animations now, but they still show that because they used to be in the D&D5e Animations module exclusively. Then it's going to tell you all of the different effects that are going to be added, and you can scroll through this. As you can see, it's quite a lot. Then your next section, which you may or may not have, is going to be things that are going to not be added because something already exists and it doesn't know from what source. Basically, it's not going to be from D&D5e Animations or from the built-in integration from AA. These are going to be things you've customized. So we have modified our Burning Hands, Firebolt, and Ray of Sickness on there. So those three are not going to be updated. If we want them to update, then we can delete them from our auto recognition menu and then do this process again. And if we want to keep them there, then we simply don't. So you can also delete two of them, but not the third, etc. And then the last section is going to be things that are from the default menu that are getting updated. Whenever you're ready, you're going to go ahead and select Update. However, if for whatever reason you haven't made backups or you want to make changes to your animation menu and everything, don't worry, we can get back to this and just cancel for right now. And you can still bring this up through the settings if you want to do it later after you've made some changes or backups, etc. So if you're ready, we'll go ahead and hit Update. And it'll tell you that everything is complete. And so now let's go ahead and take a look in our settings. And if we go into Automated Animations and look at our Global Recognition menu, you can see these sections are a whole lot more filled out. There is just a ton of content in here. And a lot of these auras have been changed into presets. And then also active effects. And you'll also notice something that we didn't touch on too much when it came to the active effects piece earlier is that things like carrying message and chill shield, circle of power, etc. Anything that is a condition or an active effect applied will be valid for being recognized with active effects from the AA menu. So you can use this to have animations for all kinds of things, not just the conditions that are built into the system, etc. So we can see that we have a whole lot more things in here. So let's go ahead and take a look at something that did not have an animation assigned to it already with the lightning bolt. Go ahead and take a look at the item. We can see now it says that there is in fact a global match. And I would use Argon here to actually cast the spell. So as you can see and hear, there are some really beautiful animations set up with the D&D5e Animations module. It's going through and giving you this really nice animation and also has some really fantastic sound effects and design attached to it as well. And we'll notice that we have our template going through here. If you have some kind of animation or design going through here, then that's probably from Token Magic Effects. Just make sure this Enable Automatic Template Effects is turned off if you don't want that. Now, as we established earlier, if you have anything in your global recognition menu that is a holdover that you want to get rid of, such as our changes to Burning Hands and to Firebolt, then we can do so. We just want to go in and find them. So we've got Firebolt, delete that. And then we'll also go in and delete Burning Hands. We'll also get rid of our Ray of Sickness that we created, because again, Gomer has it customized. as we mentioned earlier, you can rerun the update menu. And this also works if, for whatever reason, you need to close that initial pop-up and you need to take care of other things. You can go ahead and come in here and use this update menu button. And this will tell you what's being updated. You'll notice that the list here is a lot shorter than it was previously because we've only got 3 things to update. So now we'll go ahead and run the update. And if we go back in here, we'll see that Ray of Sickness has been added back. Let's go ahead and take a look at Firebolt in its new and improved form. So we'll go ahead and use the cantrip from the Archmage here. So we've got a sound effect and this cool animation that plays. So a bit of an upgrade from our previous version. Now we'll notice that if we use it from Gomer, that this is a blue Firebolt now, as opposed to having a nice sound effect, although the animation is relatively similar, just because of how we happened to customize it before. But if we go in and look at the item, we'll see that this is still uncustomized, so it still has everything that we changed about it earlier. And now if we fire it again, it'll match that global behavior. And with D&D5e Animations and any other module that is bringing in a bunch of imported settings for automated animations, you can do the exact same process that we did originally when we were customizing these. And that is turn on customize and copy from the auto recommendation. And now we've changed it to all of the settings that we have in the auto rec. And we can modify this, so again, if we wanted them to have a, say, purple flame, we can do so. And the same process applies for creating something completely from scratch. And just as we established earlier, our Ray of Sickness having been customized, we have maintained that. So this is going to play out exactly how our custom version of Ray of Sickness was previously. You can see we have our circle, disintegrate, etc. And again, if we want to change that to use the regular global recommendation, we can do so. Now, when it comes to restoring backups, you kind of have to do this by category. This is also where maybe having a character set up that has your customized version of an animation copied onto it and kept there so that you can push it back up might make more sense if you want to have a more granular approach here. So for example, if I go to customize Gomer here, I've still got this customized information. Now I have to be careful because as soon as I make any additional changes here, I'm going to lose it. So I would probably want to have a dedicated character that's my backups character. But here I have that saved and I have that customization that I can push back individually if I want to. And again, we'll have the same kind of thing here where we do copy to the auto recommendation rather than from. That allows us to overwrite things individually if we preferred our version of things to whatever animation preset module we have going. If you are restoring backups, then we will go into our global recognition menu, and then we'll use the menu manager. So restore default just wipes everything clean slate, which is perhaps useful if you have made a lot of different changes and decided that you don't like them or something like that. Then you can clear it all, and then you can use your preset module like D&D5e Animations to reset everything back to its core setup. Merge menu is going to just compare the two menus, the one that you have in and the one that you're bringing in, and it's going to take anything from the file that you've selected that is not present in your current menu and bring that in. So it's going to look and see, okay, there's an entry for acid arrow on the new menu and in the existing one, skip it. But there's not something for Eldritch Blast in the existing menu, but there is on the new menu. We'll bring in the Eldritch Blast, etc. So it's only going to bring in the things that are missing. It's not going to allow you to overwrite specific things. Then finally, we've got the overwrite menu, and overwrite menu is going to erase an entire category and bring it in from a menu file that you've exported previously. So we can demonstrate that really quick. Here, I'm going to go ahead and select yes. It's a little scary, but it's going to be all right. We'll go ahead and select our file. And then you can choose to do check, uncheck all, which will completely reset everything or copy everything from your menu and bring that in. Or you can do this by category. So here, we'll do range. As we said, it's going to erase everything. So all of the ranged entries that we have are going to disappear, and the range entries from our other menu, which is the one from earlier, are going to come in. So if we do that, we'll see now that we only have our original set plus Ray of Sickness. Now, assuming we just want to bring back Ray of Sickness, we can go ahead and delete the firebolt here. And then we can close out of this and go back to the D&D5e Animations module settings with the update menu. And we can then see it's going to bring in all of the ranged animations and also the ones it's updating. It's going to ignore Ray of Sickness here. And if we hit update, then that will bring everything back. So as you can see, it's maybe clunky if you're just restoring a backup for one particular animation, which is why I would again recommend having a dedicated character or actor that has your customized things copied onto them and ready to go. So that's everything you need to know about using D&D5e Animations and all of the amazing features that it gives you. I do want to take this moment to call out that there are a few other really great animation presets type modules out there in the community. A big one being the PF2E Animation Macros module for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. It does have a slightly longer list of required modules to use, and there is a little bit more functionality there. It uses a lot of macros in the customization, so it gives you a ton of power and features. The reason why I didn't include it here today is because it is technically on maintenance mode, so there might be a little bit more troubleshooting involved versus the Animations module, which is being a little bit more actively maintained. It is still a fantastic module and worth your consideration if you are in the PF2E world. And that's going to wrap up this deep dive on automated animations. I hope that you enjoyed and that you learned something about this module, whether that's something as simple as the basics or something as complex as how to chain everything together and those pesky nuances between delay and wait. Let us know in the comments what your favorite animation is that you've seen or assembled yourself with automated animations. And of course, tell us if there's anything that you think we missed here and what you'd like to see us cover next. This has been Zephyr with the Beta Wiki channel. If you enjoyed this video, then subscribe to keep up with all of our latest content and consider becoming a patron. Not only do you support the channel, but you'll also gain access to all of the modular systems and scenes that we've made for Foundry VTT, like the ones you've seen in the background here today. Once again, it's been Zephyr. Thank you so much for watching. Happy gaming, and have a good one.